This is our City Hall, built in 1843.
City Hall.
When we were the first capital of Canada, so we had to have a built as a, well, the capital of Canada had to have it. It's the capital of Canada. We had to have a city hall that befitted our status as a nation's capital. So this is where it was built, and we've had a farmers market on the market square here for over 200 years. The oldest English farmers market in Canada. Very old apples and bananas. But this is the downtown core. The customs building is back to 1792.
Oh, 1792.
In its present state, because it did suffer a fire in the late 1700s, this dates to about 1824. But this is the church that anybody who was anybody attended back in the early days. Lord Sydenham attended here. He was the man who chose Kingston as the first capital in 1841. So it is a beautiful little church if you get an opportunity to take a peek at it sometime. As we go along King Street, these are some of the homes owned by the local businesses. The business people had their stores back on Princess Street, the main street in town, and their houses were built out here. Close enough to their business, but far enough away that they just plunge there for a moment. This just off to the side of the bus is City Park. But first, that building back there, that was Hotel Belvedere. That house was built in 1880s and became a hotel around the turn of the century. And make no bones about it, we lobbied to have this built here because in 1830 it meant economic security, it meant jobs for the local community. And so they built this one, opened it up, at its heyday, at its peak, it held 500 of the worst politicians 500 of the worst people in Canada. They closed it in 2013. They said it was too old to do its job properly anymore, despite the fact that they were still working on it at the time. So they still spent money on it until the day they closed it down. They've opened it up for tours in recent years if you get the opportunity. And there is a tunnel that goes down from that house underneath the road, comes up in the middle of the main cell block as an escape route for the guards inside. And if the warden wanted to go to the prison in the rain without getting wet, he could just go this way. But inside there's all sorts of history of the penitentiary system itself, weapons confiscated from the inmates, methods of restraint and punishment, the whips, the racks, 1800s. It's all available to be taken a look at there. It's just pay by donation, so it's, well...
What is the usual name of this church?
Which is now closed. You can barely see it now on the sign.
Closed?
This is the Church of the Good Thief.
Oh, why is Church of the Good Thief?
Built in the 1890s. It was typical of the time that when you wanted to build a church for the community, you would ask for volunteers to come and do it.
Okay.
So they put out a call for volunteers, and the only people who would actually come over and do the work were the people in Kingston Penitentiary. The inmates. They'd do anything for a day outside the prison, I suppose. So they volunteered their time and their work. They came over, dug a hole in the ground. Out of that hole in the ground, they brought these stones. So they dig a hole, use whatever was in the hole to build the walls of the church. This is the church that they built. It was St. Dismas, who was crucified with Christ on the cross. And St. Dismas is the patron saint of the condemned man. So there's the tie to the inmates in the penitentiary. And as a further little reminder of who was responsible for building the church, look above the front door, you'll see St. Dismas on the cross. Looking back at the people who built the church, he's looking back at Kingston Penitentiary. Beautiful little church. Unfortunately, the parishioners, the people who attended the church there, got too old. The population went down, and so they sold it. They sold it to a developer. To stop, you can look at the sign above the front door and you'll know exactly what this is. Can you read it?
Proposed official
Prison for women. Would any ladies like to get out? This was built in 1930. prior to this one being built. Ladies, if you committed a crime, maybe you murdered your husband in his sleep because he snored. I mean, who would blame you?
This
But whether you
will
lived in
be
Vancouver or Halifax,
the city
if you
will
were
be
found
seeking
guilty, you would be
possible
brought to
community
Kingston,
benefits if it
and
is
you would spend your
increased
time in
and
Kingston
approved by
Penitentiary across the street with the
Prison
men.
for women.
That's where the women in Canada went to jail for committing murder and things. Finally, they decided in 1930 there were enough women in the penal system in Canada that they needed their own penitentiary, and that's why they built this one. It was built with prison labor. The men came from across the street at Kingston Pen and built a prison for women.
Okay,
So
is
we've
the
had this
prison
one
for
since
women.
1930, and they got at the bus. They've trimmed the apple trees in the front yard, so we should be able to get a reasonable view of it.
Oh. Apple tree. That's the first house of the Prime Minister of Canada.
There through the trees, you can just see Bellevue House. It was built in 1838. Built by a tea merchant in 1838. And the locals made fun of it. You can see it. They called it the Pico Pagoda because he sold tea. The Tea Caddy Castle.
We cannot
But
see
his
the house.
real name became Bellevue House, French for a beautiful view of Lake Ontario.
Oh,
And
Bellevue.
Sir John A. Macdonald and his family came here to live in 1848. His wife had taken ill. We believe she had tuberculosis, consumption they called it at the time. And the doctor said, move to the country, the fresh air will do you some good. So this is where they lived in 1848. Unfortunately, his wife's health did not improve, and while they were living in the house, his only son at the time died. So they were heartbroken and moved back to the city. But the home itself is still kept today the way it was when Sir John A. and his family lived here in 1848. So it's a beautiful little trip back in history if you get the opportunity. Another nice place to visit in Kingston. Before the pandemic, it was $3.85 to tour the house. But the reason why it's a little difficult to see is because the apple trees in the front yard. But that's typical of the houses of the 1850s. They would put an apple orchard in front that would give fresh fruit to the people who live in the house, but also give them a privacy screen from the people walking by their street, by their house. So this is Bellevue House. One of the homes Sir John A. Macdonald lived here. Beautiful house if you get an opportunity. The houses in this area, by the way, pre-pandemic, were selling for about $500,000.
Oh,
Pretty good deal.
I
And
know.
again, because
So
of the
that's the
pandemic
house.
and because
Bellevue
people are
House.
running out of houses to buy in Toronto and they're coming to Kingston, our prices are going up too.
Bellevue House.
But it is a lovely area. Queen's University is the third oldest university in Canada. The oldest is McGill University in Montreal. The University of Toronto is second, and then Queen's. Queen's got its charter from Queen Victoria in 1841 and was originally a Presbyterian theological school. So you come here, you get your degree in theology, and then go preach the Word of God to a flock at a Presbyterian church. Just off to the passenger side of the bus, that's one of the dormitories for Queen's University. That's
Queen's
Victoria
University.
Hall. A new practice field for the Queen's University sports teams built. It's actually the roof of the underground parking garage that was put in.
Oh.
Across the street on the driver's side is the School of Business. It features modern architecture along with a 1900 era Victorian schoolhouse. The building itself has won many awards for the passenger side. On the door side of the bus, that's the old train station, because the train tracks used to come down here. They were torn out in 1967 as a Confederation gift to the city, and the park was created.
Mm.
It's a wonderful gathering spot in downtown Kingston.
Yeah, from Montreal.
Yeah, $1,000 cruises go from
Ottawa,
here, but it's a
Vancouver.
3-hour cruise, and you don't get to see much of the island. Best cruise
Mm.
from Rockport.
This is shopping center. Ancient Adidas, Columbia, Tommy Hilfiger. Everything is here. Are you going to spend your money?
Yes, my darling.
Okay, see you there. So we are here at Big Apple. And then, Mano, ito gumagawa po sila ng chocolates. Ayan, chocolates product or cookies, everything. Naman, di ba niyo dito? Big Apple Store. Good. 249 for 100 grams. Ayan. Chocolate. Custard tarts. $2.99 each. The Big Apple Store. This is kalahati ko ang din kasama.
Hindi kasi mas madali.
Teka, dito si Juby pala. Si Juby pala wala. Ay, si Juby.
So it's time to go home, but it's so bad that we were stuck kasi po na-flat tire kami. So we're just waiting for the bus, other bus na mag-pick up sa amin para makauwi na sa Toronto. Finally, dumating na rin ang aming bus. So salamat ulit sa panunood, pakikinig sa history ng Kingston. See you everyone!